All right, so imagine being a 5-year-old trying to navigate the world and figure things out, but doing so in a way to where all you know at that time, that little 5-year-old brain of yours, that if you dress pretty, if you get good grades, and if you remain silent and you just get as small as possible, that is the ticket to receiving less physical abuse, less mental and verbal and emotional abuse. That's not necessarily the initial ingredients that you might suggest would prepare somebody for the world and to be massively successful in it. But that is exactly what Cynthia Thurlow, nurse practitioner, went through as a child. And her story is pretty remarkable. We take an hour to talk about the business side. So this is the business of medicine. It's a conversation where we're talking about the things that she's done right to get to a place of nearly 500,000 downloads per month with her podcast, to be a best-selling author with her next book coming out this month. 10 years to the day, 10 years ago today, she stepped out of the major healthcare system after working in cardiology, going through Johns Hopkins, doing some really, really accomplished things in the healthcare system. 10 years ago today, she stepped away from it all and she took a risk in herself. She bet on herself and she has accomplished something really substantial, and she's just getting warmed up. If you are a clinician, if you are thinking about leaving the medical healthcare system and starting your own thing, or maybe you have just started it, you are definitely going to want to watch this conversation and hear from Cynthia, the way in which she processes problems and challenges and overcomes them, and the ways in which you can too. So with that being said, thank you to Cynthia Thurlow, who right in the middle of her book launch, a couple of weeks away from her second book, The Menopause Gut, coming out, she took the time to have this conversation, all for the benefit of you, the clinician that is also pursuing major, incredible things within your own private practice. I hope you enjoy. Okay, right on. Cynthia Thurlow,
So good
thank
to be here,
you
Matt.
for joining me. Thank you for being here, part of this conversation. Well, first and foremost, I reached out to you in a very, very busy time and season. You have a book that's about to come out, your second book. And so truly thank you for taking the time out. And it was only last week, I think, that I reached out. So you are amazing. This is the business of medicine. It's not even a podcast. For whatever, I'm just going to say conversation, right? This is a conversation between an incredibly achieved clinician who has carved her own way in um, in medicine and in perimenopause, menopause, intermittent fasting, all kinds of things, and has created something that, as I work with clients all over the country, even abroad. I mean, I had a doc in Australia that
That's
follows
awesome.
you, loves you, wanted an introduction to you, and the whole thing. So your impact is very wide and it's deep. And so I want to talk about the business side of it. And to keep it kind of simple, the business of medicine is really sitting down with those who have, for the most part, really figured it out, right? Figured out how to build a meaningful, impactful practice. In some cases, your case, a big podcast, profitable, but then also something that hasn't like consumed their life to the degree to where they're not able to be a husband or father, wife, spouse, the whole thing. So I'm going to start by just reading your very modest bio that was sent over by your assistant. And then I'm going to color in a whole bunch more details because I read bios and this one's very modest. But Cynthia Thurlow is a nurse practitioner, host of the Everyday Wellness podcast, author, soon to be 2X author, and international speaker with over 15 million views for her second, not one, but two TEDx talks, intermittent fasting, transformational technique. With over 25 years of experience in health and wellness, Cynthia is a globally recognized expert in perimenopause, menopause, intermittent fasting, and has been featured on all kinds of TV shows, including The Entrepreneur, Medium, The Megyn Kelly Show. The list goes on. You're on a mission to help empower women to live their most optimal lives in perimenopause and beyond. And as we touched on briefly, your second book is coming out here in a couple weeks, The Menopause Gut. I definitely want to open up some space to talk to you, but I want to go back in time during this conversation, and this is not about tactics or strategy as it relates to being a clinician. This is about the Cynthia Thurlow that um, evolved into this place that you're in. You and I were introduced by Dr. Gabrielle Lyon
Mhm.
probably 3 years or
Yep.
so, 4 years ago, something along those lines. And just in that short time, I've seen a big evolution. But as I dug in, you've come a long ways. And so I know that you've touched a little bit here and there. And so I know this is kind of sensitive, but I'm a product of a broken home, divorce and all kinds of things, and all kids are really a product of their environment. And so, um, I know that you experienced that yourself when you were young, and then had the remarriages, and then the family kind of swell as a result of the whole thing, and that was a really like tumultuous kind of time of your life. I'm curious on just your thoughts as you look back. How did your younger self, that 5-year-old and beyond, sort of shape you as you started to see the world?
Yeah, such a good question, Matt. I mean, to give everyone some context, I have had two parents that I grew up with. My dad, very smart, but likely never diagnosed with either PTSD from Vietnam and was on the spectrum. Long term alcoholic, very verbally and physically abusive growing up. And my mom, who is an overt, covert narcissist and also very verbally and physically abusive. And my parents got divorced when I was 7, and I remember being relieved. If you can imagine, like back in the
Mm,
70s, no one's parents were getting divorced. It was like the last thing that any kid wants. And I remember just being relieved because there was so much conflict at home. I didn't grow up in a home where people were emotionally regulated. I don't even think I understood what that was. And so, what I developed into in response to my environment, where my mother, always had men over and men slept over, and she has been married multiple times, was that I made myself small and I got good grades and I was pretty because if I did all those things, everyone left me alone. That was just what I learned was that achievement was the way to deflect attention. And, I navigated a certain group of friends in high school, certain level of achievement. My parents were very hard on me about grades and looks and all the things that I think, people that are not emotionally regulated or particularly healthy probably force their kids to focus on. And so I kind of developed into a young adult that continued to achieve, continued to do the things that were expected of me. I was very much a people pleaser. Not surprisingly, when I was in college, I originally thought I wanted to go to law school. I got in and then felt like that wasn't a good fit. One of the best decisions I ever made. No offense to any of the good attorneys that are
mm,
out there, but I don't like to argue. So I don't know why I thought law school was going to be the next step. But I got a dog, and getting this dog really shifted my perspective. And so I suddenly got interested in veterinary medicine and human medicine. And so ended up going on to do a second degree and then ultimately and trained at arguably one of the best medical institutions in the United States. And it was the most incredible experience. It was one of the best decisions I've ever made. I didn't know if I'd be any good at any of these things. Went to graduate school at the same university, was in inner city Baltimore at a time when there were so many social issues. Having grown up in the suburbs, I had never seen some of these kind of social issues that patients experience. It was humbling. It was enticing. I was arguably around some of the most intelligent people I'd ever met, and I was learning at this exponential pace. And so I continued kind of plodding along, ended up in ER medicine, then ended up in clinical cardiology as an NP, met my husband at 30. And for a long time, I told myself I was never getting married because I didn't want to recreate what I grew up in. Like I knew
mm,
enough to know that what I grew up in was not normal, but I was so fearful that I might recreate what I grew up in. And so got married to my husband in 2003, another one of those big, really good decisions that I made. I remember my grandmother telling me at 18 that one of the most important decisions you will ever make is your choice in partner. And at the time, I thought that sounded a little sexist, but I now realize she was absolutely brilliant.
yeah,
And so I kind
true.
of plodded along, had 2 boys, and then probably, 15 years ago when I realized how serious my older son's food allergies were, I started to pivot. I started to get much more interested in food. I was very interested in, why are we seeing escalating rates of allergies in young children? When I was growing up, there was like the one weird kid with a peanut allergy.
Mm,
Now all these kids have food allergies. And so that kind of pivot got me interested in looking at other things. And so probably 12 years ago, I did additional training, and then I was increasingly having a harder time going to work and towing the allopathic party line. Number one, I was a people pleaser in a very male dominated field of cardiology. So you can imagine how the NPs were treated in many instances, although I had really good relationships with colleagues that were my age. And I felt like I was becoming increasingly disenfranchised with this model of you come in with a symptom, you get a prescription. I was like, there's a larger conversation we're not having. I really think that lifestyle as medicine needs to be the focus. And then we layer in medication when that fails. And so 10 years ago today, I left traditional allopathic medicine. It was not an April Fool's joke. I actually left, and I remember my practice kept offering me more money, better schedule. At that time, I worked 2 days a week for 6 hours. To give you some perspective, I
mhm,
was really, really, really part-time because they just kept accommodating whatever I wanted. They were like, "We are desperate to keep you." And I said, "This isn't about you. This is about me. I'm no longer learning." And then
mhm.
they understood. And so, having zero business training, I took this massive leap of faith. My husband asked me if I was having a midlife crisis, and I said, "No." But he said, I'll give you 2 years, and then you're gonna have to go back to working regular hours. And so I spent, the next 6 months creating group programs, and I had women almost instantaneously that were interested in working with me. And so, one-on-one programs, group programs. 2 years later, I said to my husband, "I think I wanna borrow $5,000. I really wanna do a TED Talk, and there's a company that will write my applications and give me some coaching."
So
And again,
hold
my
on.
husband was like, "Why do you wanna do this?" And I said, "Well, I believe in challenging myself."
Mm,
Honest to God, that was the whole impetus. I wanna challenge myself. That seems like something that would be incredibly challenging. So 80 plus applications go out. I finally get a talk. First talk is in Toronto of December of 2018. At the same time, I accepted a second talk in
mhm,
March of 2019. And why this gets interesting is in the midst of the month before this talk was supposed to be given, I was hospitalized for 13 days. I almost died. I had a ruptured appendix, a slew of complications. And while I was in the hospital, in between feeling sorry for myself and really being very sick, I promised myself that if I got out of the hospital, I wanted to get home to my family and I wanted to do this talk. And of course, the organizers thought I'd lost my mind. They were really worried because I still had a ruptured appendix. They had not yet taken it out because I was so sick. I go on to deliver a talk 27 days later, that 2 months later, 6 weeks later, goes out and goes viral.
mm,
And that changes everything. All of a
mm,
sudden, my husband took me seriously. He thought I
mhm.
had again lost my mind. And it was within that 2 years. It was literally within that 2-year span of time.
On
And
the
yet
on
that
the far end of the 2 years, right? So, I mean, it's
April 1st, and then that talk went viral in May of 2018, 2019. So it was 2 and yeah, like a little more than 2.
yeah, I gave you a little bit of grace. Okay, so I wanna I pause you because um there is so much there. There is so many different things that you had to overcome and battle through. So I want to just quickly go back to a couple of things you said. First thing, when you said you wanted to get small and the good grades and to be left alone, like, why did you want to be left alone? And was that because of
Because
the
in my
physical
house,
abuse?
there was so much physical and verbal abuse. Like, the last time I was struck by my mother, I was 16 years old.
Mm. Okay,
So
so
there was,
you.
and it didn't matter what I did when one of your parents that you live with is so volatile. My nervous system growing up in that environment was completely rewired. Like a kid that grows up in an environment where parents are loving and not yelling constantly and not hitting them. And so, like, I grew up in physical and emotional violence. I grew up in an environment where my body never felt safe. So I always use the example of the duck paddling across the
Yeah.
water. The duck looks calm on the surface, but underneath
Mm,
is paddling furiously.
mhm,
And that is what my nervous system was doing,
mm.
never feeling safe. So the way to be safe in the mind of an 8, 10, 12-year-old was to get quiet and get small. And I
Good
recall my
grades and
paternal grandmother saying to me, that I went from being a very happy child to being a very quiet child.
Mm. It's a defense
And
mechanism.
absolutely,
Mm.
absolutely. So I was very, I'm an empath. So when I'm in the room, I can read the room. Like, what are my superpowers, Matt?
Mhm.
I can generally read the room better than anybody, which means I can be a little bit of a chameleon. And I don't say that as
Mm.
a good thing. I mean, that is all, I've all worked through plenty of that in
Yeah.
therapy. But when your parents are very focused on the physicality,
Mhm.
and very focused on how my achievement makes them look good because it's not about me, it's about them. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's an interesting dynamic to grow up within. I can talk about that objectively now, but at the time,
Mhm.
whatever is your norm is your norm. You don't
Correct.
realize that it's abnormal or maladaptive,
Mm.
but it's so different than how my children have grown up, like leaps and bounds beyond how I grew up, which is means that much like I know for you and your
Mhm.
family, it
Mhm.
means you have to do a lot of work to
Yeah.
be able to show up differently.
And just recognize how where our superpowers start and stop, right? Like we get really good at self-soothing and
Mhm.
not needing validation from others. We can self-validate a lot of times. What you got that I didn't get that is a constant work in progress is the empathy side of it. I i actually ended up on the other side where if I'm not very careful, I could have a relationship just fall off of a cliff
Mhm.
and it doesn't bother me. I had so many starts and stops relationally growing up with these men that would come and go that I just developed this ability to be like, oh, they're gone, no big deal,
Well, I have that too. You know what my
oh,
nickname was in college?
say it again. In college, what?
My college nickname, Ice Queen.
Oh, is that, you're kidding?
No, I'm not.
Oh,
In fact,
wow.
my male friends actually gave that to me, and it was because in my
Mm,
mind, because of the way I grew up, I wasn't like I always had really great relationships with women. I mean,
mhm,
that might be surprising to hear, but I think that's what probably saved me was that I always had really solid girlfriends throughout my
mm,
entire life. Like the friend you can call in the middle of the night because you need them and they will be there for you
yeah,
kind of friends.
yeah,
But with men, because I had my father is one example, my stepfather was a freaking creep, and we could probably unpack that about completely inappropriate comments, attention, etcetera, that I didn't trust men. And so if
mm,
I didn't trust men, it meant I never let my guard down, and so I would leave someone before they would leave me,
yeah,
or I just treated people horribly.
yeah,
And it was because I was icy. It
mm,
was I'm here for my own needs. I don't care about yours. And I'm sure over the course of my young life, I probably hurt a lot of people in a way that I'm not proud of.
mm,
And it was easier for me to just pretend like like a little light bulb will go off in my brain. I'm like, I'm done with you.
mhm,
You don't exist.
yeah,
So I do have that side. And
okay,
I think that it's protective. I think in
mhm,
many ways, if I couldn't protect myself from my father or stepfather, I could sure as heck protect myself from anybody else.
right, yeah, yeah, interesting, interesting. So we both definitely share that in common. Um, okay, so that's helpful because it we all have our story, we all have our upbringing. Some of them are messier than others, but it really, it, um, I've seen both sides. Like you're very you're like a razor blade. Like you're very you're always super on point. Whether it is intellectually, it's your preparedness. I mean, when we worked together, you always showed up not just on time, but you had notes. We would talk about previous um, but then there's the side of you too where when it comes to your boys and lacrosse and being a mom, and then Todd had some medical stuff. Like you're on point all the time, but we all have two sides to ourselves, right? It's just some are more blunt than others, and I've always appreciated that about you, because for the most part you're very predictable. Every once in a while, like, dang, Cynthia, where'd that come from? But I want to go back. So today, 10 years ago today, April 1st,
Yeah.
2016, you kind of gloss over the fact that you fell out of love with the big hospital
Mhm.
care system, what was happening there, egos and male dominated. But there's a part of that story that I think a lot of clinicians today can identify with, and or are considering to make that leap, or they're just on the other side of it and they're like, what did I do? Do I go
Mhm.
back? They may have different levels of support, but it wasn't a clean break for you. So here you were in the major healthcare system. Yeah, I mean, you didn't say where you went to school and things, but John Hopkins is a no joke, thing. So there's no wonder why you're being offered more money and things, but it wasn't about the money. And that's also something on the business side, that when people leave, it's almost never about the money. It's
Right.
other factors, right? That are happening or not happening, that's causing people to step away. But it's not like you had a history of entrepreneurship in your family. It's not like you had others that you could look to say, I'm considering leaving the certainty of a guaranteed paycheck and benefits and things, and putting my toe in the water on entrepreneur side. You just decided you were going to leave, and then there was this gap, and
Yeah.
there was I think that gap is important. And maybe some more details about, like, okay, so Todd's like give you 2 years, but what that tells me is there's a certain level of support, but at the same time, it's
No,
like there's a certain level of
absolutely.
doubt at the same time, right? So tell me
Yeah.
about like where your head was at, and
Yeah, I
for
mean,
others that are thinking the same way.
well, and I don't it's funny. I've made decisions in my life where I haven't fully understood why I was being drawn to make them, but it made sense later. And so, if you're at all familiar with human design theory, I'm a
Hmm.
manifesting generator. I tend to leap and figure it out, and that's my personality. I
I'm the
take a
same.
certain amount of risk. I am married to someone who is the opposite. I'm
Hmm.
married to an
Same.
engineer at heart who works in the energy industry, who works at a very high level, is incredibly successful, and I would not be here without him. Like, let me just be very clear. My husband, who's incredibly financially conservative, gave me the gift of time.
Mm.
And if I didn't have that, that would not have been possible. We had been very fortunate. His consulting company had been sold, and so we had money saved. And he had said, "This is how much money is saved." And so that will buffer, but I want to be very clear. This is not this turns into your hobby. Like, we have some friends who call themselves entrepreneurs who really
Hmm.
just have a hobby. And I was like, oh no, I'm serious. I know I'm going to be successful. And he was like, well, that's great, but you have no business training. And I believe in you. I'm 100% behind you. But like, he watched. I mean, there were a lot of days of, oh God, I mean, the things like, I'm such a proud person, but asking your friends to be interested in programs. And at one point I was a beauty counter consultant because I really believed in the mission, but like, I'm not a salesy person. That's
Hmm.
not my personality. So I
That was
really
after you
leaned in.
left the hospital, you
Oh
became a
yeah.
beauty
I mean,
sales.
I did a lot. Like, I mean, I didn't make a ton of money, but like,
Yeah.
very clearly I was willing to do the work. So, I bought a
Wait, so
program and a,
sorry, I gotta pause there. So you left working in the hospital,
yep. I
and
worked
you're
for
in
a private
cardiology.
cardiology practice. Yep.
Yep, and so you're doing big things, got big degrees, a lot, and then you're saying that following that, you worked at a cosmetic counter
Oh, no, no,
selling.
no, no, it was more like as I was building my business, I was I had little side hustles, like beauty counter, like, maybe I was making a couple $1,000s a month doing that. I mean, it
But it
was
wasn't about
like
the
an on.
money, it was about I guess where I'm surprised by that, Cynthia, is what I'm hearing is that that's the level of, you were so serious about
Yep,
not going back.
correct.
You were so dedicated to what this next chapter would be, that you took on roles like that
Oh, yeah.
to as a means, not about the money. Of course, you're not going to
Yeah,
make good money. Like
right.
it's apples and oranges. But am I understanding that correctly? That's the level of dedication that you had to
Oh,
this
yeah,
next
I
chapter.
did.
That's
I
incredible. Wow.
literally did lectures to schools. I would go in and talk to the students and the teachers. I mean, I was doing free lectures all over the place because I was like, I'm so committed to making this work. I know there's a place for me. I just don't know what that looks like. And so it was like, I created group programs, I created one-on-one programs. And I'm not kidding when I tell you, like, I was profitable quickly because I charged enough for my time, although I didn't fully appreciate all those things. I hired my first business coach 6 months in, and this
Oh
person
wow.
now has probably a 9-figure business.
Mm.
And she gave me some good business advice. She was like, you need to create a program, you need to adjust your pricing, you need to do, I mean, so whatever people told me to do, I recognized very early on I needed to invest in coaching from people who were more successful than me. And I had to be willing to do the work. Like, I think there are a lot of people who are entrepreneurs, they're not willing to do the work. And it's not about
Mhm,
hustling. Like, I hate that word because it's not about the hustle, it's flow. If you're doing it
mhm,
right, it is total flow state. Like, when I'm on a stage and I'm speaking, I am total flow state. I don't even think sometimes I'm cognizant of what I'm saying. I'm just in a completely relaxed state of mind. So, as I was making all of those decisions, it was getting me one step closer to what I wanted, which was I wanted to make money, but I also
mhm,
wanted to make impact. And how do you
mhm,
do that? It needs to be multi-pronged. In 2018, a colleague who was a clinical psychologist came to me and said, I think we should do a podcast. And I was like, okay, we'll do a podcast.
2019, so this is
20
after your
September of
TEDx?
2018. Yep. This
This
is
is after
before
your
my
TEDx
first
then?
TED Talk. Yep.
Okay, okay.
So I co-hosted a podcast for about 20 months. And what I came to realize is I don't like to play by anybody else's rules. I don't like having to be so buttoned up.
Mhm,
I like organic stuff. I don't want to create a ton of content. I mean, I realized my personality, like I'm so well suited as an entrepreneur because I'm kind of a, pardon me, go fuck yourself. That's in my mind. I grew up in New
mhm,
Jersey. I mean, there are things
mhm,
where I'm just like, that doesn't make sense to me. And so, we didn't have a falling out. She just said to me at the end of 2019, I don't think this is in alignment with my goals. And so little did I know, this is how life kind of happens for me. Little did I know that the pandemic was coming. And gosh darn it, guess who got to scale their podcast during the pandemic? Because I started doing it just myself. And I would pitch the
mhm,
podcast to really
mhm,
big guests. And generally, they would say yes.
mhm,
And so I look at it as there's these kind of serendipitous moments where I don't think I necessarily knew that that was leading me down another incredible path. But before I did the solo podcast, I joined a mastermind. And I think
mhm,
that for me was this really, really pivotal decision. Like, I didn't know anyone. I'm an
mhm,
introvert. I told my husband, I need to go to this event in San Diego. We're going to fly the whole family out. We'll make a vacation out of it because it fell on my older son's birthday. And I'm very much the kind of mom, like, I'm not willing to not celebrate my kid's birthday with them for as long as they'll have that.
mhm,
I know
mhm,
my kids are now adults, so that might come a time where they'll prefer to be with their friends, but that's okay. We all fly out to San Diego. I go to this event. I'm invited to a mastermind lunch. I go to that. I meet one of my closest friends now, one of my closest entrepreneurial friends, actually two of my closest friends that are entrepreneurs. I met both of them that day. What an incredible, friends that are like salt of the
mhm,
earth, like my brother or my sister. And joining that mastermind, it terrified me. I'm going to say the number and you'll probably laugh. $3,000 a month. I was panicked
mhm.
because although I was making good money, that was still a lot of money.
Sure.
And what I've learned is that when I make those investments, I take it really seriously because that was a lot of money for me then. And so I got involved with this mastermind, which was a great fit for me. Some of the biggest names in the health and wellness space, recognizable physicians and researchers and leaders in the space were part of it. And I just sat in awe. I had such terrible imposter syndrome at the
Mm.
first event I went to, like horrible.
Or were you
And I'll
thinking
never,
that you well, at an event,
I
why were
didn't.
you feeling that way?
Yeah, so the very first mastermind event after that initial event, it was, like 50 of us in a room, and
Okay,
I'm
so it
telling
was
you,
still a
people.
smaller kind of event, so,
Yep,
you're looking around the room thinking, "I don't
these are
belong
people
here."
I followed for years, and holy shit, I'm in the same mastermind with them. And so I recall, one of the co-leaders of this mastermind, he walked up to me because he was watching me over a couple days, and I was looking a little dejected, and he said, "You deserve to be here." And it was like there was something about hearing that validation for me was so sobering. Like, you deserve to be here because I think that for such a long period of time, I kind of felt like a imposter. I don't know how else to
Mhm,
describe it. Like, I'm a
mhm,
clinician, but now I'm not doing that kind of traditional work. And
sure.
and at the time in my state, nurse practitioners could not function autonomously. So I really did do lifestyle as medicine and worked very closely with a lot of internal medicine people. So I was functioning within the scope of my role, but not
Mhm,
doing, and later I was fully autonomous, but it was such a pivotal moment. And then, of course, a couple months later, the pandemic happens. But that
right.
lifeline to that group I think was pivotal for me because everything that they taught me to do, I did. And in fact, they said, "You are so coachable."
Mm.
And I said, "This is a lot of money for me. This is not like some of these people, they make that in a day or they make that in an hour." And, that was a large investment. And the irony is, that was 2019 and 2022. I was like their entrepreneur of the year. My business had literally gone from 0 to 60 in that short span of time and then just continued to become more and more profitable from there. But I think it really speaks to, you have to believe in yourself enough, and then you have to be willing to make investments. Like along the way, we all make these investments in ourselves and in our business, but you have to be willing to do that. Like if the investment makes you hold your breath, then it's probably the right one.
We
Because
had a
it should
conversation
be
about that in Miami, didn't
right.
we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, and you have to phrase it as
Hmm.
an investment, because if you say, "Oh, it's a cost," or
Hmm.
"It's expensive," I'm like, those are all limiting beliefs. Like, you
Yeah.
have to look at it as, I'm investing in myself and in my business, and in doing so, I'm gonna drive my business farther than I would have on my own.
So let me ask you this. Um, so you went from being a child that was all about like, let me be small and let me not be noticed. Let me just kind of like exist and nobody see
Mhm.
me, look at me. I'm going to check all the boxes. That way I, uh, nobody directs their attention to my, and and that's a very like scarcity type mindset by way of
Mhm.
like, I don't want abundance. I don't want abundance of attention or, anything. But then there's clearly there's stories within this whole story about how you evolved because
Mhm.
one thing that stood out to me really is within 6 months you're hiring your first coach. Within 6 months you're doing these investments, but yet you didn't work around entrepreneurs. You didn't have entrepreneurs into your, so you're already, it's something that already happened. A series of things that have already happened that tells you to expand and to be
Mhm.
looking outward. But then um, what really stood out to me is, so when whoever it was that approached you at the conference mastermind that said, you deserve to be here. Why is it that those weren't just words? Like, why did that actually land with you and create this like paradigm shift?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, like, something that's important to note is that when I was in 5th grade, I was just talking about this the other day to a friend. When I was in 5th grade, at Mr. Thompson at Allenwood Elementary School said to me, "You're so quiet. If you don't find your voice, I'm afraid you're going to get drowned out." And so
Mm,
he said, "When you go to middle school, I want you to run for student government." And that very tiny, petite, quiet girl ran for student government every single year. I won for classroom, everything, vice president of my class. I mean, through all of high school, went to college, same thing in my sorority. And so I slowly kind of found my place where I could, I could be in a position where I was in front of other people and I was confident, but it was always from the position of like, I want to educate or I want to inspire people. It was not like, "Hey, look at me. I'm so awesome." Like, it's not that there's a lack of ego, because obviously there's an ego. I'm a human being,
mhm,
but
mhm,
it's always from a good place. And even now, like when I did a lot of lectures for my practice that I used to go all over the place. I loved doing that. Did a lot of TV work. If I'm My performing persona is Lola, honest to God. This is how I boiled it down to, my therapist and I have
gosh, yeah,
unpacked
Sasha
this.
Fierce.
Yeah, so it's
It-
like when I'm in that mode, I'm completely comfortable and confident because I'm in
mhm,
an education. I'm helping people, I'm inspiring people, versus it's very different than an egomaniacal,
mhm,
narcissistic kind of like, "Look at me." Like, that is so far from where I am. But you're right, as someone who's an entrepreneur, you are the face of your business.
mhm,
I can tell you that medicine tends to attract an interesting crowd. I think there's a lot of introverts in medicine, but you get to control a lot.
mm,
What I found funny was when I went from being, primarily a clinician to being an entrepreneur, I was like, "Oh, I got to step up my game." I'm not wearing a lab coat. I actually need
mhm,
to make more of a concerted effort to, be fashionable or feel good in my skin or like curl my hair or put some makeup on, because when you're in scrubs and I have my hair in a bun, it's just a different dynamic. And so I think that for everyone listening, I think especially for the introverts that are out there, it can feel a little daunting, at least initially, that you realize like you are the face of your business. Like
Mhm.
you are showing people what is possible. Like obviously my niche is really perimenopause and menopause, and people are sometimes surprised to know that I'm 54 years old. But
Mhm.
I remind people, I'm like, listen, there are so many things that are possible. And a lot of what I talk about are things I do exactly,
Right.
like the way I eat, the way I exercise, the prioritization of sleep, having healthy relationships, which
Mhm.
shows up for me in my business. Because, like, there are plenty of entrepreneurs, I'm sure you know them too. They're really successful, but they have nothing outside of that.
Yeah.
They don't have a
Yeah.
healthy marriage. They don't have great relationships with their kids. And I would be the first person to say, my grounding rod in my life is my husband,
Mhm.
like full stop.
Mhm.
He is my litmus test. He's the one who tells me to get my head out of my ass or tells me I'm right or wrong. I take his opinion really seriously. But
Yeah.
the other grounding rod in my life are my kids, and they
Yeah.
know that. So, I think that you have to have something outside of the entrepreneurial set job role. Otherwise, it can get pretty toxic because, as I recall many years ago, there was this really amazing female cardiologist I work with. Her name was Dr. Ann Safko. Ann was probably 10 years older than me. She never had kids. She had a dog she had a really close relationship with and had been married. And she used to say to me, Cynthia, you need to understand, we could be here all day and all night. There'd still be work to do. And I take that into the
Yeah.
entrepreneurial space.
Yeah.
The work is never done. At some
Yeah.
point, you have to have boundaries. At some point, you have to say no. Like, I'll give you an example. Next week, I'm going back out to LA to do more podcasts. And this one podcast, it's a pretty big podcast. And the producer yesterday decides that we need to have a conversation before next week. And so I said, I have 15 minutes before my first podcast of the day. And then when I got up this morning, I was like, no, that doesn't work. I don't want to I have to kind of do some things before I jump into a podcast. Like I have
Mhm.
to make sure I'm ready to give 100%, 150% to you as the
Mhm.
podcast host
Mhm.
and clear my head. And so I said, I'm available from 11 to 11:15, or we can catch up over email.
Mhm.
And so since then, it has been, are you available later today? Are you available tomorrow? And I was like, let me explain to you. I have 16 podcasts this week
Mhm.
on top of a regular work week. No, I'm not adding anything else to my schedule. I said, and transparently, unless there's something dire, I'm an easy interview. Like you
Mhm.
lob me a ball and I will run with it. And I
Right.
will ensure that all of my answers are of high value to your community.
Mhm.
Boundaries are important
Yeah.
because without them, you will be more tired, more ragged, more irritable, more grumpy. And that's not good for your entrepreneurial spirit. So I interject that as one of many examples of me fully being able to say no and just not explaining myself like, no, I'm not available. No,
Mhm.
I can't do that. No, I'm not adding one more thing to my day. I'm like, we are like up to here.
Mhm. Yeah. And and so for those that are um in more of a place of desperation, or they're not getting chased down the way that you are, but they're feeling the impact at home, like you have these two very clear lightning rods that are personal related, and it's something that I have to work through with a number of clients where they've been doing that. They've just been grinding and hustling and
Mhm.
all the things that, you and I hate to see happening when somebody's an entrepreneur, because we get into space to be able to have time freedom and money freedom. And yes, our days are full, but it's by design, right?
Yep.
And that's a very you're not handcuffed to a job when just because you have a full calendar. But that's different than others who are just like they're just white knuckling it. And so one of the things that you're being very clear about, which is massively important, is being good at saying no,
Yep.
and understanding priorities and understanding um, what to say yes to versus what to say no to. But you say, like in medicine, it's like there's always something more to do. That's the way it is in entrepreneurship.
Absolutely.
Before I became an
The
entrepreneur,
work
I
will
was in
never
law
go
enforcement.
away.
The law crime never stops. It's like doesn't take holidays or evenings or weekends off, right? But you just have to know when to turn it off. So what are your as you look back and knowing what your schedule is, I want to start wrapping this up, but I would like for people to hear, and again, I'm looking at through this lens of so many others that want to accomplish, because we haven't even gotten into your podcast, and that's like, professionally one of the loves of your life. And are you 150,000 a month download was the last number I had. You're probably well north of that now at this point.
Yeah,
Um,
it's more like 400 to 450,000.
That's amazing. That's so
Yeah.
incredible. That's amazing. So
Yeah.
we haven't even gotten into the whole podcast situation or things, but you didn't get here overnight, right? In 2016, 10 years ago today, you left, you took a leap of faith, you worked at cosmetic counters and free speaking engagements. I guess if you were to look back at 10 years ago today, having a decade's now worth of experience, and give yourself advice and and the do's and don'ts, things you would do again, but things you would do very differently. What advice might you give yourself?
I don't know if I would change anything, Matt, to be honest with you,
Mm,
because things kind of fell into place. I mean, one thing I didn't mention, but I think is relevant to this conversation was it was exactly 2 years to the day that I made more in a month than I did in the entire year. And I remember I was, literally flying home from an event, looking at my phone, and I was like, "Are you freaking kidding me?"
mhm.
Like, I remember I worked for a practice that would give us like $100 and they would say that was like a bonus at the end of the year. And I was like, that doesn't even buy
Wow.
groceries. Like,
Wow.
completely
Yeah. Wouldn't even
offensive.
buy a tank of gas today.
Yeah, I literally was like, "Are you kidding me?"
Mm,
So, I think that it's very easy to look at people that are successful and say, "Oh my gosh, that must have happened all overnight." It was like, incrementally every single year, I was doing different things to move myself forward, and I honestly wouldn't change anything because I feel like it's all part of that journey for me. I mean, it makes sense. Like, oftentimes when we retrospectively look back, we're like, oh my gosh, it all makes sense for me. Like, I made strategic decisions, but I don't think I per se was thinking strategically. It was just, I was literally making decisions based on what I was interested in.
mhm,
And I think that we sometimes discount the value in that. Instead, we're always looking for ROI. How much I
mhm,
invest? What's the ROI? How
mhm,
much money? What's my net? What's my this? What's my that? Um, and so I think sometimes we overthink things. I would
mhm,
encourage people to, I'm not suggesting they think less. I think it's very hard when you're coming from a traditional model where insurers decide how much you get reimbursed, you calculate how many patients you have to see a day to meet your
mhm,
overhead, to meet your staff expenses, to be able to pay yourself, put gas in your car. It's very hard to go from that to something that seems a little more nebulous, a little less clear. So at some point, you have to take the leap. And that leap could
mhm,
be something as simple as you go from full time to part time, or you have a side gig. A lot
mhm,
of nurse practitioners I know, they get their side gig going and they get it successful. And then they feel comfortable enough to take their foot off the accelerator with the full time job that they hate, that they go to, that pays the bills. And so I think for each one of us, there's a different level of risk. Not everyone has spousal or partner support,
mhm,
emotionally, financially, or otherwise. And so I acknowledge that. But I think at some point you have to be ready to rip the band aid off. Like, I'm very much a rip the band aid off person. Like, rip it off and I'll figure it
mhm,
out.
mhm.
Whereas there are others that kind of, they neatly pull off one corner
Yeah.
and they're like, oh, that's too hard. I can't do that.
Mhm,
And then maybe a couple months later, they start to work on another side of the band aid. I very much am of the belief system that most of us do best when we're making, a conscientious effort to make ourselves uncomfortable. I mean, ultimately, what this all comes down to is some of us are more comfortable being uncomfortable than others because it's when we're uncomfortable that the growth happens
yeah.
emotionally, spiritually, physically, however you want to look at it. The other thing that I think is really, really important, Matt, the value of therapy, the value of having a business coach, the value of having mentors, all of which are really, really important. I didn't have a mentor because there was no nurse
Mhm,
practitioner doing what I was doing. In fact, they all
mhm.
thought I lost my mind. They tell
And
me
I don't
now
think
they
there
thought I
even
was
is even today
no,
I mean, at least
no,
that I'm aware of.
no. I mean, they're incredible people, like, doing incredible things
Mhm.
academically and obviously,
Sure.
when I finished my NP program, the terminal degree was a master's, not a doctorate. And people always say, oh, you should go back and get your DNP. I was like, oh, hell no. Why would I do that? I mean,
Yeah.
unless I'm doing it for an intellectual itch that I want to scratch, but I want to get 2 kids through college. That's my
Yeah,
focus right now. But I think for a lot of people, I think you're either an entrepreneur or you're not, and that's
I
okay.
agree.
It's okay to not be an entrepreneur. But I am such an entrepreneur that I don't know how I ever existed in that model of care, having mostly men agree or disagree with what I was doing,
Yeah.
and then going, "Okay, whatever." Whereas now I would have something else I would probably would say.
There's no probably about it, and I want to validate. Not, we're not the kind of people that need validation, but I do think it's important because you never know when what you're hearing or seeing on social media or whatever is real or not, right? And so I want to validate the fact that you mentioned being coachable
Mhm.
and and being a good student, right? Like, it doesn't surprise me that you found your way to this mastermind and that one guy said a thing that really changed everything because
Uh,
while you're very headstrong and you know what you want, you're also your receptors of learning, they're always up,
yeah,
and you're very um, you're very coachable, and that's a huge thing. So it's one thing when I'm working with clients and they have big dreams, goals, and aspirations, but they're resistant to hearing a different angle or a different approach, even if it's well validated, it's a proven thing and it's proven itself over and over again. Some people just want to be they just want to carve their own path, right? Um, and I say that because first of all, it's incredible to hear about the growth of your podcast when you and I started working together well after you had a lot of momentum and a lot of growth. And so it was, I don't even remember what year it was. Anyway, we're in you want to do a whole team meeting, an annual
mhm,
thing. So we're
yep,
down in Miami doing this thing.
yep,
And you mentioned like get comfortable being uncomfortable and going down there. I'm like, hey, that's what we're going to do, right? Like I'm gonna and I don't remember if you or I don't know if you remember what I said about the discomfort that we are going to get put in the room, but like if the goals didn't make you like borderline want to shit your pants and like super uncomfortable, it wasn't the right goal. Right.
yeah,
And so
they're
here we
not big
were
enough.
talking about these podcast goals because at that point a lot of things were in play. And at this point you have multiple different revenue streams now. And
Mhm,
the podcast was not new. It was growing, but you had big goals for it. And so we talked about some initial things um and I said, hey, Cynthia, does that really make you nervous? Does that number make you nervous? You're like, well, it's a big number. Does it make you nervous though? And you said, no, it doesn't. So we came up with a different number,
mhm,
and at that point, did that make you nervous? Like that one makes me nervous. And Cynthia, I'll never forget. For not only did you make my job easy to be able to help facilitate this whole thing because you didn't put the brakes on, but you were receptive to the fact, and you let me push you. So when you say
mhm,
get comfortable being uncomfortable, I guess that's part of the validation is that you're not just saying those words, which a lot of people do. You
yep,
actually allow for me to push you to really be uncomfortable. It was very evident. It was like on your face, but also you trusted the process, you trusted yourself, you trusted the team. And then 2 weeks later, I get a message from you that one of our initial quarterly goals you had already hit. It was a quarterly goal that you'd already hit because you just you just latched onto that whole process, the whole goal, the whole strategy, everything, and you just went all in. And you had a team that rallied around to help make it happen as well. Um, and that was like a real highlight in like it's feather in my cap to have been a part of that whole thing, but at the same time, it was you and your team that did it. And so I think there's some lessons there for those who they say that they want it, right? There's a difference between people, and this is health, relationships, you name it. Like it's that saying, you can talk skinny, but if you eat fat, you're not going to
mhm,
be skinny, right? If you say you really want something, you have to put in the work. If like you believe that growth comes from being uncomfortable, then you truly has to lean into the discomfort. And so I'll give you the last words here, and any advice you might give to others who are dreaming and aspiring to grow something big, whether it's a podcast of almost a 500,000 downloads a month, which will be north of a 500,000,
We're
or
we're
an
at 20
author,
we're
a
at
multi
20,000,000 and counting
what is
total.
it, 20 million and counting?
20,000,000.
TEDx speaker with 15 million and counting. You like it's which by the way, the TEDx thing wasn't until years afterwards, $5,000 loan, right? Like there's that saying, it takes 20 years to become an overnight success, right? So
Yeah.
whatever somebody's pursuing, I want to be on the biggest stages, speaking with the biggest people in the industry. I want, massive podcasts with really nice checks each month from sponsors and deals and YouTube channel, whatever it is. What's your advice? Because you've checked a lot of these boxes. So what do you have to say for those it feels like maybe that's not even possible, but you're evidence that it really is?
Yeah, I mean, I think that you have to get your mindset right because entrepreneurship is not for the faint of heart. I mean, if you see some of the memes, it's like, you have a good day and then you have 5 bad days, and you have a good day, then you have 5 bad days. I mean, you have to be comfortable with a predictably unpredictable environment. When you were a cog in the wheel, going to work and getting a paycheck, it was fairly predictable. You show up for so many hours, every 2 weeks you get a paycheck. It does not work that way. You really do have to think differently. And that's why that mindset, like personal development, has made all of the difference. And it's a constant effort. It is not something like I read one book and that fixes everything. I would add to that personal development and therapy, whether
Mhm.
it's somatic therapy, talk therapy, Reiki work, whatever it is. I mean, I do a little bit of everything, but the differentiator between myself and a lot of other entrepreneurs is that I'm constantly working on myself intellectually and in a way that it allows me to show up and be authentic. Because one thing that I hear from people when they meet me in person, they're like, "Oh my God, you're as down to earth as you sound on your podcast or as an interview I saw you talking." And I'm like, that is because I'm very comfortable with myself. I know
Mhm.
who I am, I know what my strengths are, and I play to them. And so I think for each one of us, part of the evolution as an entrepreneur is getting to know yourself better because I know where my blind spots are. I
Mhm.
know, like, there's certain people that I will talk to, lean into, seek guidance from when, self-doubt or a feeling of rejection and it happens. Like, anyone that's listening, if any of you think I haven't been rejected a lot, I think I've got a pretty thick skin, but even I will occasionally take that to heart, and I'm like,
Mhm.
"It's not about me. It is not about me. It is about someone else. It's about timing. It's the universe saying it's not right now. If it's not this, it's something better." And so the sooner you can embrace that, you'll enjoy the journey a whole lot more. But if you don't tolerate anything that's totally like, if you are uncomfortable with things being unpredictable, predictably unpredictable, then maybe being an entrepreneur is not the right job for you. And that's okay. Like,
Right.
not every clinician is meant to be an entrepreneur. In fact, most would not feel comfortable with that.
Yeah.
But I would imagine with the way that healthcare is evolving right now, more and more people are starting to consider
Mhm.
entrepreneurship as a way to have more control over the lack of control that they feel like they have in their business or even how they choose to practice.
Mhm.
I mean, that's another gigantic topic for
Yeah.
another day.
Yeah.
But that's probably what I would say if I were going to make a recommendation.
Well, as I said, the business of medicine, this whole discussion is it's simple. It's wisdom, right? Like you have all this wisdom. So what you have to say about it, I think other people would be very smart to consider and implement. Yeah, thank you so very much for the time. You're right in the thick of your second book launch. The Menopause Gut, it comes out this month. Target and uh, um, Barnes and Nobles, correct? Anywhere
Amazon,
else?
Books A Million. Yep. So pretty much any of the big retailers have it. One of the things that becomes important is as you're getting closer to publication date is that it's kind of divided amongst retailers. Definitely one of these things that if you are a woman north of 35 or care for women in that age range, talking about the gut microbiome is oftentimes left out of the conversation for most patients. And perimenopause and menopause is not just about putting on an estrogen patch. Oftentimes the missing link for a lot of patients is gut health, and so I
Mm,
think as we better understand the gut microbiome, and how it intersects with every other organ system in our body, I really think it's one of these kind of forgotten considerations for women as they're navigating middle age and beyond.
amazing, amazing. So go out, buy yourself a book, buy your friends a book, and consume it and benefit from it. My wife's 44; she's right in the thick of it, and I'm buying 10. I'm buying
Oh,
10
well, thank you.
books, and I'm giving them out. So thank you so much, Cynthia. I really, really appreciate it, and really look forward to the other side of the book launch and what the updates there. Thanks again.
Thanks, Matt.